Hurricane Maria.
Cities in which solutions and property are in need of study. This note.
Breaking news tonight, Hurricane Maria hammering Puerto Rico with a direct hit.
Hurricane Maria made landfall in Puerto Rico in September 2017 as a Category 4 hurricane with winds of 155 miles per hour. It is regarded as one of the deadliest and most destructive hurricanes in U.S. history. The storm wreaked havoc on the island, with economic loss and property damage exceeding $90 billion, killing an estimated 2,975 people.
One official saying the island is destroyed.
Crea mayor fortaleza para que las comunidades tengan acceso sostenido a la energía eléctrica. Esto crea mayor fortaleza, reduce la vulnerabilidad. Y dependencia del sistema, pero además aquí en Toro Negro estamos logrando que la misma comunidad sea dueña de la infraestructura de generación de energía y de la distribución de energía. Así que esta va a ser la primera comunidad solar en Puerto Rico cuyos dueños es la propia comunidad.
Aquí en Toro Negro estamos montando esta comunidad solar que consiste de varios microredes en ciertos lugares de la comunidad que interactúan entre sí. Cada facilidad, ¿verdad? Pues tiene su sistema solar, tiene su sistema híbrido de batería que le permite estar totalmente desconectado de la red.
Vulnerabilidad y dependencia del sistema, pero además aquí en Toro Negro
tiene la capacidad de poder interactuar con la red eléctrica si en un futuro, ¿verdad? Pues cualquiera de esos servicios estuviera disponible. Básicamente pues las placas solares, ¿verdad? El sol está disponible todo, ¿verdad? Para la eternidad en cierta forma. Y Puerto Rico pues es un lugar privilegiado de sol y aquí estamos, ¿verdad? Pues aportando la energía del sol para dar resiliencia y estabilidad a esta comunidad en Toro Negro, en Ciales.
Durante el día el sistema solar se queda las baterías cargadas y él está utilizando del sol. La batería realmente es para de noche, ¿verdad? Cuando empieza a las 6 de la tarde, que el sol se fue, automáticamente va a entrar esta batería. Eso quiere decir que la
Many of you have already done so. It's very exciting if you're a Twitter user to follow the conversation. So you can see in front of you on the main screen the hashtag. So you can submit both to the Twitter handle and to the Twitter hashtag and keep helping us create a record of what's going on here today. For those of you who are in the Assembly Hall, if you'd like to stay there through the keynote, feel free to do so. We do have, we will simulcast the keynote presentation into that room, and we will be back up here in just a few minutes to move you on to the keynote for our luncheon today. Thank you. One more thing, folks, just one more thing quick. Do not forget, please, to visit the posters and to tell us what you think about those amazing ideas by voting online for your favorite poster. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We're going to start the afternoon program. Jim?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Diaz, and I'm the Vice President for Research at the University at Albany. And I'm going to ask you to pause on all of those very productive, passionate, and meaningful conversations that you're having so that I can introduce our next speaker, who will have some very important things to say. So thank you so much for your attention. It's really my pleasure to meet my new colleague, Dr. Nelson Colon. Dr. Colon is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Puerto Rico Community Foundation. Under his leadership, the foundation initiated several programs, including the multi-sector movement for a world-class education in Puerto Rico. His expertise and insights are also much sought after internationally. The importance of the Puerto Rico Community Foundation was exemplified following the devastation caused by Hurricane Maria. The Puerto Rico Community Foundation advocated for and fostered equitable access to energy through solar communities and equitable access to water by strengthening the community aqueducts in rural communities. Under Dr. Colon's leadership, the foundation he leads became the main philanthropic force on the recovery of grassroots and Afro-descendant communities in Puerto Rico. Dr. Colon taught at the University of Puerto Rico after getting his master's in our very own SUNY Binghamton, so he's one of us. He lectured in the Inter-American University and lectured in the School of Medicine, and he founded the Caribbean Project for Peace and Justice of the American Friends Service Committee, and directed the Hispanic Office of Planning and Evaluation when he was in Boston. His scholarly writings have been published in international magazines, at Harvard's University La Revista, and local newspapers. In 2019, he was the lead investigator for Tejiendo Redes, Weaving Networks, which will resonate today with his talk, in which they painted a portrait of a successful school in a low-income, highly criminalized neighborhood in Puerto Rico. In 2018, Dr. Colon was named the Emeritus Chair of Hispanics in Philanthropy, and in addition serves on several boards, including the Northeast and Island Regional Education Laboratory and Community Foundation leads. He is a former commissioner of the Puerto Rico Civil Rights Commission, and he obtained his doctorate at Harvard. Today, Dr. Colon will speak directly to the import of this conference, Rebuilding Through a Community Capital Growth Framework for Equity and Empowerment, and the roles of universities towards a new paradigm. Educator, scholar, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and humanitarian. Please welcome Dr. Nelson Colon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diaz, for such a kind introduction. I'm truly grateful for this invitation for three important and significant personal reasons. First, it allows to reinsert myself in a conversation that started in this region around 50 years ago. So I think that I have a claim to memory in these lands. And when I came studying anthropology at SUNY Binghamton, I was a 22-year grown, experienced man, which thought that has all the answers for all the problems in the world. So SUNY is my second alma mater. Back then, we were a small group of 60 minority students in a campus where you have 4,000 non-minority students. Now, the president of SUNY Albany, Dr. Javidan Rodriguez, is a Puerto Rican. So 50 years later, there has been significant changes. As President Obama once said, change takes time, but change happens. So I also want to recognize Dr. Jorge Haddock, who's here somewhere, who is the president of my first alma mater, the University of Puerto Rico. Greetings. I also, at every presentation I do here in the continental US, I take a minute to express our continued gratitude for the support we receive from people here in the States during dire times in Puerto Rico. And we need to say that, and we need to repeat that. We need to communicate in a very vehement way our gratitude, because it happens because communities came together. Puerto Rico, it's very peculiar. Puerto Rico, it's really composed by two communities. One in Puerto Rico, and the largest one here in the continental US. So, but those two communities are connected, are linked by nationhood. So, just translating from a song, even if we were in the moon, we will be Boricuas. So thank you all. Thirdly, I want to thank Dr. Marla Perez and Dr. Cecilia Ortiz Garcia, because I think they were the co-conspirator behind this invitation. And for me, it's an honor to be here. My mission today is to collaborate with you as a group of distinguished universities and institutions in the effort of building, and I quote, a new paradigm on how universities and colleges can improve the well-being and protection of communities vulnerable to extreme weather in the future. I accepted this invitation with a great sense and responsibility, because I truly think that there is an urgent need to shift from the paradigm of disaster response to community capital growth as a strategy for building equity. In my reflections today, I'll focus on the community capital framework. When we talk about inequalities and equity, always the lingering question is, and how do we do that? How do we address that? So there is a framework that we have working at the foundation that I'll be happy to share with you, but also I'll be addressing the role of universities in supporting the growth of community capital. In a way, this is an invitation to reimagine universities as instruments for community asset building, and paradoxically, disasters as a window of opportunity to narrow inequity gaps in our society. This is a very tall order agenda. Yet, it can be accomplished if we shift the paradigm of mitigating the impact of natural events to making community capital grow. In the outline for this presentation, I will first discuss the concept of knowledge infrastructures. Second, I will present the community capital framework. And thirdly, I will invite you to reimagine RISE as a knowledge infrastructure for equitable rebuilding. Some of my remarks will be illustrated by examples from the Puerto Rico Community Foundation supported projects to show the community capital framework in action. The Puerto Rico Community Foundation is a social investor that supports non-profit organizations through grant making, technical assistance, and financing. Through these examples, I hope you will detect potential roles for universities in community equity building. Many Puerto Ricans are still recovering from Maria's collective and personal trauma. The 30,000 houses still under blue tarps, the unstable power grid, the pressure imposed by the Fiscal Management Board to collect an unpayable debt, the inaction of the federal government to disburse relief money, and the governmental incompetence and corruption those series of factors impose tremendous pressure upon us to find a quick response to people's needs. Yet, I advise it is not the moment for universities to rush to do things, but rather to pause and look at the wider horizon of equity building. Otherwise, in the next natural event, and this has happened in the past, we will land in the exact same place where we were before. In my lifetime, we have been through this 5 times already, and we keep landing in the very same place. So it is a challenge. It is an invitation to rethink the way we do things. In face of disaster, we all share a fundamental commonality, whether it be Harvey in Texas, Katrina in Louisiana, forest fires in California, Dorian in the Bahamas, extreme cold weather in New York, or Maria in Puerto Rico. Vulnerabilized communities are hit the harder. Human lives lost, the social infrastructure destroyed, financial losses for small businesses, and the weakening of the social fabric in communities. In all likelihood, our common ground is the unveiling of inequities as natural and human events strike against the architecture of inequality. For this reason, allow me to briefly use the Caribbean as a backdrop for our conversation, not only because it is the hemispheric route for hurricanes, but also because the powerful concept of regional knowledge infrastructure emerged from the Caribbean experience. For 5 decades, I have been witnessing the evolution and revolution of in the Caribbean as a practitioner, as an activist, as a college teacher, as a researcher, and now as a philanthropic investor. During those 5 decades, the need for knowledge integration in the region is ever present in the narrative of academics and practitioners. As a participant observer of the region, and with great sense of respect for the work that you all do, allow me to invite you to reimagine RISE as a knowledge infrastructure that connects research and practice in the Caribbean and U.S. regions to the audacious goal of rebuilding with equity. The idea of regional knowledge infrastructure was strongly advocated by Norman Girvan, an internationally renowned Jamaican economist. He convincingly proposed the organizing of development knowledge centers in the region, knowledge centers that will collect and organize homegrown solutions for development. In his own words, North-South relations are characterized by the acute imbalances of power, military, economic, technological, but not the least in knowledge and information. Homegrown solutions must mean the generation by local actors of knowledge, policy interventions that are specific to the local environment, and the recognition that knowledge is as important as physical capital or any other input. In his view, the architecture of knowledge in the region should be informed by three basic principles: diversity, the national context, and the recognition of local knowledge as the driving force of development. Some of the homegrown solutions suggested by Girvan are actionable through the community capital framework. The need for equity building strategies in the region stems from historic and systematic processes of decapitalization, slavery, the extraction of precious minerals and raw materials, the expansion of colonial powers, austerity measures, among others. Thus, our challenge now is how to recapitalize our endogenous sources of capital that has been historically depleted. As time passes after Maria, additional layers of decapitalization has been added to the process. One is, as we all know, the neglect of the executive branch of the federal government, the corruption structure that deviates resources from rebuilding and exhausts the capacity of many honest and committed public servants and limit their capacity to interact effectively with federal bureaucracy. And third, the relentless pursuit of the Fiscal Management Board to collect the unpayable debt. So those are the new layers of decapitalization in the 21st century. Given this context, homegrown solutions seems to be a highly promising route for rebuilding with equity in Puerto Rico. The Community Capital Work Framework is a set of equity building strategies that seek to propel self-development in low-income communities. It is composed of 6 sources of capital or assets: human capital, social capital, financial, physical, environmental, and cultural. In parallel, if you look at these 6 forms of capital, they are community-based engines to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. As you may note, this framework is more about community assets and less about liabilities, more about the creation of opportunities and less about social deficits, more about outcomes and less about processes. For this presentation, I will focus only on the first three forms of capital: human, social, and financial, since they are the cornerstone of the aggregated capital of communities. In our experience, the interactions of these forms of capital generates empowerment, self-reliance, and personal advancement. Then the underlying assumption here is that the growth of these sources of capital in communities increases equity. And there's an interesting point there. And basically, when we think of inequality, we get used to the particular box where we live in. And then we see that as an abstraction. But the dynamics of inequality is, when you look at it in the concrete, you see going in that triangle, you see growing up tax credits, you see profits, you see the accumulation of social resources. And then downwards, which captures the news, downwards you see population where hunger is prevalent, diseases, you see school dropouts, and you see the social maladies we talk every day. So in that dual movement, we need to figure out how we develop a different architecture to rebalance the asymmetry between those forces. So in the context of the framework I'm proposing to you, equity has a dual meaning. First, equity as an act of fairness, where all members of society, regardless of ethnic origin, gender, sexual orientation, class, or any other diversity, have equal access of opportunity to social resources, economic resources, education, the arts, health, equal access to those very fundamental resources. The second meaning of equity relates to finance. That is more granular, that is more concrete. However, that equity, that type of equity, refers to the net worth of individuals or corporations. Simply put, it is the difference between what you own and what you owe. That is your equity balance. Those two meanings, equity as an act of fairness and equity as a financial valuation, are inextricably intertwined in the community capital framework. The framework emerged from the Puerto Rico Community Foundation philanthropic investing experience in more than 6,000 projects in low-income communities in Puerto Rico. As the foundation pursued the elusive calculation of the social yield of its investing, any person in the philanthropic field eventually needs to face the question, in exchange for the money invested, what are the gains? And we are very good at a foot dance around that and not answering that question. So we tackle it head on, and we basically came back and looked at a very dynamic design where the research question was, what is the economic return on the philanthropic investing made by the foundation? And we created a new term, ROPI in Spanish, or ROPI, Return on Philanthropic Investing. So what's the ROPI in return for the Puerto Rico Community Foundation investment? So we commissioned in 1999 a first study with that question. We were really impressed by the results that we obtained. We invested $2 million in economic activities in low-income communities in Puerto Rico. We invested those $2 million in 11 nonprofit organizations. In return, they created 44 new businesses, supported 314 existing businesses, generated 129 new jobs. It was also estimated that the community capital increased in a proportion of 1 to 10. For each dollar invested in the community, the communities themselves leveraged that investment by 10. So the community capital was increasing, was growing from the bottom up. So basically, what I'm saying is that is a third approach to reduce inequity gaps. But then we said, and what about social yield? What is the return, the social return that we get in return for our social investment? In a certain study commissioned to Dr. Blanca Ortiz, a social psychologist, she assembled an interdisciplinary team integrated by an anthropologist, an economist, an environmentalist, that I think she's here somewhere. She will remember that, and other professionals. The original question was expanded beyond economic yield, and then we were looking at social return. With great detail, the team depicted the route of community capital building in the Cantera Peninsula project in San Juan. Through several decades, the community built a sizable capital that included state-of-the-art community center, you can see it there, 283 affordable housing units, and a children's library. We learned that in order to generate community capital, at least 3 types of assets need to be activated and interconnected: human, social, and financial assets. Allow me to illustrate the dynamics of these forms of capital through 3 examples from PRCF partners organizations. Let me look at human capital, and let me look at the experience of the Diego Vasquez School. The Diego Vasquez School, a K-8 public school, presents a powerful intersection between human and social capital, which in turn produces financial and infrastructural gain. This is their story. At the dawn of August 28, 2013, the deafening sound of helicopter blades woke up the residents from Barriada Morales, a very low-income community in the north-central part of the island, where 80% of residents live under the poverty level. Police forces enter each house with search warrants, and at least 1 adult from each, what happened here? And at least 1 adult from each of the 187 student families was arrested. It was pandemonium, yeah, we're there. It was pandemonium. Children were left under the school care while adults were visiting police quarters trying to find their relatives. The school became a safe place, a protected space, a respite. What is most striking about this story is that this is a high-performing school in Puerto Rico. That is the striking, very low income, highly criminalized, high-performing. So the Community Foundation hired a research psychologist to understand the school high performance in this highly challenging poverty and criminalized context. As we may know, Prevailing educational theory asserts that poverty is conducive to low academic achievement. In this case, however, the most plausible explanation was the strength of the school ecosystem, which includes families, community-based organization, external institution, and the school team working in conjunction towards students' academic achievement. So let's take a look now at the dynamics of social capital. Social capital is very close to human capital. Often understood as the interconnection among people and institutions, social capital yield manifests itself through community wellness, while human capital is generally thought of as an individual gain. Social capital renders collective gains. Robert Putnam describes social capital as the lubricant and the connectivity that allows the flow of other forms of capital. Let me illustrate the high value of social capital through Hurricane Maria's devastating experience in Puerto Rico. Despite the high death toll that ranges between 3,000 and 4,600, more people did not perish from thirst, hunger, or lack of a shelter, thanks to their community support. The community became the survival unit, and non-profit organizations became community first responder. The strong bond among community members amplified their solidarity, expressed through collective kitchens, communal water reservoir, and the care of bedridden people. Churches and non-profit organizations are key institutions in the architecture of social capital, and in fact, they were the community first responder. I will share some direct results of their work. The 200+ organizations supported by the Puerto Rico Community Foundation served 78,000 people, provided backup energy for 69 primary health clinics, installed solar systems for 30 community aqueducts, provided microgrid for geriatric affordable housing projects, and launched the first community-owned solar community in Puerto Rico. This is basically the yield of social capital in a disaster situation. In many communities, their social capital saved their life. A highly telling example of the power of social infrastructure capital is the Toro Negro community in Puerto Rico Central Mountains. This is the first solar community owned by residents. This community remained without electrical power for 8 months after Hurricane Maria. A very well-organized community of 28 families invited the foundation to set up the first community-owned solar community in Puerto Rico. There are other solar communities in Puerto Rico, but this one is community-owned, and that makes a huge difference. The Toro Negro Electric Authority was inaugurated in May of 2018. Their capacity to use their bonding and bridging capital earned them a significant grant to set up the system. Previously, the families paid an average of $60 per month in electricity, and now they are paying $3. The community financial wealth increased by $250,000, and it was their social capital that laid the foundation for increasing their financial capital. I see a critical role for universities in strengthening social capital through internal bonding and cohesion in communities, and by bridging with external institutions. Researchers, on the other hand, are a key piece. A team, as an example, a team for Duke University developed the net metering assessment for the solar community of Toro Negro. And let me go to the last example. High in social capital, poor communities lack access to financial capital. Often, their financial income comes from salary grants, local businesses, and microenterprise financing. Usually poor communities function on subsistence assets such as microenterprise, government assistance, and self-employment. Most too often, endogenous economic development activities are financed by personal resources or loan. Those who are bankable use credit cards, mostly from department stores. This is an endless cycle of permanent decapitalization by which, in the best scenario, communities maintain their subsistence level. Then it begs the question, how low-income communities can recapitalize themselves financially? Let me illustrate that question with the experience of Proyecto Matria. Proyecto Matria, at a much smaller scale, are following the route of collective economy. A case in point, they are a case in point. A few weeks ago, the Puerto Rico Community Foundation approved a business incubation grant for Matria, a nonprofit organization that seeks to empower women to live their life free of violence and filled with achievement. Matria effectively interweaved human, social, and financial capital. Their mission clearly expresses the intersection of this capital. The organization supports self-sufficiency, integrated services, and enterprise incubation. This is a homegrown solution generated by local actors, as Norman Girvan advised. The design followed by the Puerto Rico Community Foundation is fundamentally a learning from projects like Matria. So the Puerto Rico Community Foundation has a three-pillar design. Basically, it relies on personal support for the entrepreneurs, it relies on developing entrepreneurial skills, and it relies on financing. So let me say just the last word in closing about some thoughts within this design of community capital growth on the roles of universities and the role of RISE as an equitable infrastructure. The intersection between knowledge development infrastructures and community capital is an invitation to reimagine universities as a tool for building personal and collective equity. That is, universities as a tool for shared prosperity. Intellectual capital is, without a doubt, the greatest strength of any university. Along the same line, I invite universities to envision themselves as research and development centers for the growth of community capital. In the rebuilding effort, each university could become a knowledge platform for equity building in their respective context. I respectfully suggest that RISE can become a platform of platforms for equitable rebuilding in the U.S. and the Caribbean region. A platform of platforms that will be informed and enriched by their context-specific experiences. As suggested by Girvan, knowledge is as important to development as any other form of capital. The need of knowledge infrastructure for under-resourced communities has the urgency of now. More than ever, focused efforts on equitable rebuilding is needed as the inequity gap widens. With that sense of urgency, I'm sure that we all share Martin Luther King's audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and freedom for their spirits. Thank you. Now I think we have time for a few questions. Here's one.
I was curious what portion of the effort housing played in terms of real recovery, because if we don't concentrate on human recovery, we really are missing the boat.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take 2 or 3 questions, then I will address them so we can be more efficient with time.
We can just ask folks who have questions to come up to the microphone. That way we won't have to worry about passing them around. There's 2 microphones in the center aisle. Please advance the microphone and present your question.
In the meantime, I'll address this one. Yeah, housing. Housing plays a very important role. That's what falls within infrastructure. The Puerto Rico Community Foundation created an alliance with the municipality of Loíza and the Ricky Martin Foundation. Within a few weeks after the hurricane hit, we were already rebuilding houses. Those houses are way above what FEMA did in 1989. So they are solid construction with, according to codes, they represent a significant improvement of what the community had before. In total, they are 79 houses, but a key addition to that is all of these houses have solar panels and backup batteries. So basically the notion here is you will generate enough local capital so that when the next event strikes, you don't go back where you were before. So that's the fundamental notion. But housing was a key piece in this rebuilding effort. Here is one in the back, and here's another one.
Who?
Has anyone thought about removing the solar panels in the event you have another storm so that you can put them away? Are they removable so you can put them back up after the storm? I'm just curious.
Thank you. Great question. Great question, because it is a great question because I have a great answer. Yes.
First of all, thank you for such an energizing message. I wanted to ask you, when you mentioned that RISE could be a platform of platforms, what do you think are 3 key areas that we need to tackle in these sub-platforms that RISE will have in the future when all these efforts come into fruition?
You see, that is not a good question because I don't have an answer for that. Yeah, I'll take a shot at it. On the removing solar panels, we are training community people are being trained to do that work. So at the present time, we have enough warning in advance. So community people who are becoming the technicians of their system are ready to pull down the panels, put them under protection, and then after the event passes, go back and put them back up. The interesting part of that is that most of the people that are being trained are women. A large proportion of the trainees are women. Going to the question of RISE and a platform of platforms, I think what we have learned is that there are a lot of avenues for universities to enter in a situation like this. So basically, the suggestion is first to develop strategic framework to approach that strategic framework that could be shared with their local communities, but with the center platform as well. What do I mean by strategic platform? Who has great information about equity rebuilding on housing? Who has great information about equity rebuilding on economic development, which is, by the way, a critical area. If your economic infrastructure is destroyed, then it takes a lot of time to go back to provide that kind of economic services. So who has enough information about health? Just take, for example, this critical issue about death in Puerto Rico as a consequence of the hurricane. 2 universities came to the fore, but that was pretty much after it happened. It would have been wonderful to think in terms of, which by the way, many agencies do that, think in terms of protection for human lives, basic measures, who to connect, hospital, community clinics. That very simple step that the foundation took, which was to energize the emergency rooms in community clinics. I mean, that is not astrophysics. That is so, it's a no-brainer. If you have an extreme situation, you don't need air conditioning in a huge facility. You want your dialysis machine to function. You want your insulin to be refrigerated. There's very basic things that can happen. So what I'm saying is to reimagine in an event of equitable rebuilding, reimagine universities as knowledge centers that could be captured and shared once the disaster strikes. But the other part of that question, of that answer is, we need to always bear in mind that a disaster happened when the event strike on the inequality structures. It's the clash of those phenomena that creates what we call an event. So part of the role of universities could be to be a constant monitor of inequities in their communities. Did I get my check? Yeah, okay, good. Thank you so much. Thank you, my pleasure.
So please join me again in thanking Dr. Cullen for this wonderful remarks. So we begin the afternoon session with the 15-minute break. But before we send you to that break, we have a couple of pieces of information. First of all, there are 6 panels this afternoon. And you will have noticed from the previous session, when you walk out of here, there will be folks to guide you to those various locations. So if you're going to the same room, great. If not, please look for the volunteers who have made themselves available to help you navigate what we call our podium here at the University at Albany. We will go directly from the panels into what we have organized as the cohort discussions. And for those of you who are not familiar with what we mean by the cohort discussions, we have here today to join us Jacob Manns, who is the individual who organized the cohort discussion component of the original RISE workshop that Cecilia Marla organized about a year ago. Was it just a year ago. It seems impossible that was just that short time ago. And Jacob is here to tell us about the design of the cohort discussions, the purpose of those discussions, so that you can make good choices following the panel in terms of which cohort conversation you want to participate in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa. My name is Jacob Mance. I'm from the University of Minnesota, and I'm deeply honored to have played a role in shaping the cohort discussions that happened in Mayaguez. I was not the only one, and I see a lot of fellow participants in the audience who were instrumental in shaping that workshop. I think one of the really important pieces of that workshop is that we were engaging all of the participants directly. All the people who came to the workshop in Mayaguez had something to say about how RISE was to operate, who RISE was to serve, what the mission of RISE is, could be. And now in this conference, we have some 300 more voices that we want to capture, and we want to hear from all of you who you think RISE should serve and how you think RISE should do that service. So I want to pick up on something that Michelle Wyman said this morning, following a very strong message from Cecilio about what RISE could be. Michelle said also that RISE is different for each and every one of us, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that we come from different places, we have different expertise, and we should all find ways of leveraging this amazing network to best suit our needs. So with that, we've organized 3 hour-and-a-half-long cohort work sessions where we want to try and focus on clearly identifying some key statements and goals for 4 different kind of sectors or groups. So the 4 different groups that you can choose to go into, the first one is focused around government officials, indigenous peoples, and community cohorts. The second kind of group is focused on higher education administrators. The third group is focused on researchers and practitioners, and the fourth group is focused on students. And if you take a look at your program on pages 14 and 15, it will tell you which rooms to go to, and you can self-select. I think a lot of you chose before coming to the conference which of those cohorts you would participate in, but please do select one and join us at 4 o'clock for these conversations. Over the next 3 days, we're trying to get 3 very clear deliverables. 1, we want to understand from all of you, based off of where you come from and what cohort you select, how RISE helps you fulfill your mission, or what you feel the mission of RISE could be, and what the key goals for RISE is in that mission. The second thing that we want to understand is what are the practices, what are the projects, what are the behaviors that we all need to change, that systemic change that Cecilia was talking about, to actually achieve these different missions. And the last thing that we want to identify is if we're going to be working in increasingly complex partnerships in increasingly complex situations, what are the metrics that we need to develop to actually evaluate whether or not we are successful in our work together so that we can redirect and improve as we move forward. So those are the goals for the cohort sessions. I look forward to seeing you all there, and we'll see you at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. So now is just a quick process reminder. We have a quick break till 2:15. Then we'll do the panels. Then we'll go directly to the cohorts, and then directly to the reception and the dinner. So make sure you read your What's Next sheet to remind you that you need to bring your dinner ticket with you if you're joining us for dinner. Thank you.